Hello tarot lovers! Do you love nature-based tarot decks? If so, stick around because today I'm going to be reviewing Tarot Gallimaufry by Lisa McLoughlin art, possibly one of the most unique tarot decks I have in my collection. So let's have a look. Hello, I'm Sally and welcome back to my channel, Vaudeville Manor, House of Art and Tarot. For today's review, as always, I'm going to start with flip through, followed by a more detailed summary of what you can expect to get from this deck. starting with the box then, it is a nice rigid box with a wraparound design. This design is repeated on the back of the cards. It's kind of like the undergrowth, I think, of twines, things you expect to find in a wild garden perhaps. And there's a little bit about the deck from the creator's point of view. So Lisa McLoughlin is also a nice little logo here. So this was a pre-ordered deck directly from her site, and so she's just personally signed it, which was a really nice touch. I'll mention this, sadly Lisa has had some of her other decks cloned, and so she's felt it necessary to actually put this information on here so you know that you're getting a genuine deck. But yeah, really nice rigidity to the box. With the book, this is a really nice sized book. I think I mentioned this in the last video. So yeah, this was a limited edition, and if you're interested in this deck after watching this review, I'd head over to her site, because these are selling out fast according to Etsy. Apparently in the last 24 hours 4 have been ordered, and if there's only 150, I think they're going to go quickly. So there's a really nice introduction about the deck, what inspired her, how she went about creating it. The general premise of this deck is that it's embracing that chaotic side of nature, using a lot of symbolism from the natural world, so from plants to the elements and to animal energies. She has provided different spreads which pretty much reflect the spreads you'd expect to find in a tarot deck. So you have, but she's renamed them to reflect this idea of nature, and which I really like because it ties together everything that this deck offers. So you have a 3-card spread here, which she's called the Harmony Trio spread. But the way she has gone about this is that we're looking at energy, so the energy that you're currently feeling, the source of this energy, and what the advice that nature is giving us to utilize this energy. You have the Elemental Medley, which is a 5-card spread, which I believe is like a mini cross shape, so a card in the middle, a card above and below and either side. You'll notice here that there aren't any diagrams of the spreads, but just a description of where the cards go. So she states whether it's centre, to the top, to the side, etc. And then you have the Edict Mosaic. Now, reading through this, I think this is just a variation on the Celtic Cross, because it's 9 cards, and judging by where she's saying they should be situated, it sounds to me like it's the Celtic Cross. I haven't actually tried it yet, but that's what I'm going with. And then some questions that will help us with this, using this deck. You get pretty much a double page write-up for each card, and Lisa has provided an upright description and a reverse description, and again sporadically throughout the book she's put this statement here to say that it's only been printed in the UK by the company she uses, Ivory Graphics, and her copyright, and that you can only get it from her Etsy store. Now the cardstock is pretty good. It's maybe a little bit thinner than some of the Oracle decks that I have. I would say this is probably similar to, say, a deck by Lo Scarabo, so not too thin, not too thick, and it's got quite a glossy sheen to it. Now I need to talk about the size of these cards because they are quite big. So this is a standard tarot deck, and as you can see, it's quite a bit taller and quite a bit wider. It is in fact the same width as your typical oracle deck from most commercial decks, but again, you've just got that height. And as I've mentioned in the past, I do have quite small hands, and unfortunately, even though I knew it was a bigger deck, I thought, oh, I'll be fine, I can manage oracle decks. But when we come to the whole deck, I can't actually get my hands around these to grip them to do the normal standard shuffling. And talking about shuffling, I realised in my previous reviews I haven't actually talked about what these decks are like to riffle shuffle, and that's simply because I can't do it. Again, referring back to the small hands, I can't grip the cards to do proper riffle shuffling, and I haven't even tried it with these, and I'm not going to try and do it on camera and embarrass myself. I suspect they're fine for riffle shuffling if you like to shuffle in that way, but just be aware, if you have small hands, you might struggle to grip them to shuffle them. Oh, that's the best I've done, actually. So I've just kind of worked a way of a workaround for mixing these cards up. I could mix them around, but because I don't typically use reversals, I haven't gone with that yet. But it's fine, I still love the cards. It's just one of those things where the ergonomics haven't quite matched together. As I mentioned earlier, this deck has been inspired by the kind of chaos of nature and this idea that if you go into the wilderness, everything tangles together, so the plants, the animals, the energies, and that's one of the reasons that I was interested in getting this deck. The other reason is because I really like the style and the way it has been created. For me, as somebody who studied textiles at college, it's very reminiscent of contemporary textile art, where there is a crossover between imagery and colour and line work. So if we just have a look at this one here, how some of these could be translated into stitch and sort of like dyed fabric in the background. So visually this deck really appeals to me. You will notice that there is a lot going on, so subtle details like the birds in the background. Lisa has incorporated her own artwork with photographic imagery that has been digitally manipulated, which have been overlain by additional drawings, and obviously the colour has been manipulated as well. They're very, very striking, particularly like this one here, with the colours on this, and even things like the dried honesty petals here that you might not notice on the first glance. So you really have to be prepared to delve deep and look at all the beautiful details in the cards. Now, in her introduction, Lisa mentions that she has identified various plants and animals which run throughout this deck. So you will find repeated symbols. They're not copied. So for the falcon here appears on lots of different cards, and she gives you a lot of detail about what the symbolism of the plant or the animal is. And so on these cards you have the dandelion seeds floating away, so she's obviously picked this particular image for this card because it's an essence of the meaning of that card. And so this, I think, will become a very intuitive deck to work with, and particularly once you become used to the symbolism that Lisa has used. So just another example here. So we have the bleeding hearts plant, which I think is called Dicentra, I could be wrong, which is, I've had on a couple of the cards from my readings. The moth has come up quite a few times, the lunar moth, and we have the barn owl, which crops up in quite a few of the cards as well, which I really like. I like the idea that there's this repetition and it gives you an opportunity to build upon your knowledge and to connect with nature on a much deeper level. And I'm really excited to continuing to work with this deck for that reason. As I said, a lot of these cards, I'd say most of them, are very intuitive. She's given enough visual clues to help you realize, to help you gain some insight into the cards. So if we look at Wild Wind 4, and I'll talk a little bit about the names in the next section, we've got a hedgehog here, we've got sort of fallen leaves, and all the other symbols here are relevant to this idea of taking some time out, some reflection and some rest. And so when I got this card, just the hedgehog alone really spoke to me of this idea of resting and almost having my own version of hibernating, and to reflect upon where I'm at, perhaps, rather than forging ahead and rushing into things. Whereas this one, we have the fig leaves, we've got grapes, we've got the luxuriousness of the peacock leaf, and then the passion fruit. And so this one is all about you sort of treating yourself, maybe being a little bit indulgent, and the strong, I just love the strong visuals. Having said that, because of the level of detail, and because perhaps I'm or you are not familiar with the significance of the symbolism of the images, some cards I think are going to be a little bit more challenging. So we have the ruler card here, which is the Emperor card, and when I did actually draw this card in a recent reading, and I did sort of struggle to unpick what this card was telling me. Obviously I'm aware of the general meaning of the Emperor, however I did have to rely on the written description, and once I read it, it did make sense, and there were some details here that I hadn't actually noticed on my visual inspection, and the book was able to point me out. So I think if you're planning on getting this deck, you might just be prepared to possibly work a little bit harder with some of the cards when you receive them in your readings. Now, although this deck is inspired by Rider-Waite-Smith, it is very different, and you'll notice that Lisa has changed the names for each of the major arcana and also the 4 suits, which we'll look at later. So instead of the Fool, we have the Wanderer. The Magician becomes the Alchemist. The Oracle is our High Priestess. The Nurturer is the Empress. The Ruler, Emperor. The Guide is our Hierophant. The Lovers is the Beloved. Chariot becomes the Vanguard. So Strength becomes the Force. The Hermit is the Sage. The Shift is the Wheel of Fortune. Justice becomes the Balance. Surrender for the Hanged Man. The Transition for the Death card. The Equilibrium for our Temperance card. The Temptation for the Devil. The Tower becomes the Catalyst. The Beacon for the Star. The Illusion for the Moon. The Sun becomes the Radiance. The Awakening for the Judgment card, and Fulfillment for the World card. Now, I really like these new names for the cards, and I feel some of them, the names actually sum up what the card is really about better than some of the original titles, in my opinion. And just so you know, Lisa has included the original Rider-Waite-Smith title for the cards. Moving on to the suits, we have Wild Earth for Pentacles. We have Wild Water for Cups. Wild Ember for Wands. And Wild Wind for Swords. So if you've got any elemental decks, this is tuning in to the elemental aspect of each of the 4 suits that we typically find in tarot. And again, Lisa has included the original name for each of the cards. She's also included another subtitle, which again mirrors what she's done for the Major Arcana cards, to sort of express the energy of that card. So if you remember, this deck is very much dealing with the energies that we would find in nature. Lisa has also renamed the court cards. So the Page is the Seeker, the Knight becomes the Explorer, the Queen is the Guardian, and the King is the Sovereign. And again, original title has been included and another subheading to describe the energy of that court card. So if you struggle with court cards, this would be a really good deck for you, because obviously you've got the word passionate here to sum up the energy of the Knight of Cups, which I find really, really helpful. So visually, in comparison with the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith deck, they are, as I said, very different. With Rider-Waite-Smith, we typically get figurative images, meaning that we get humans in the card doing human everyday activities, whereas in this we have a mixture of, as I said, animals and plants and bright colours. Both decks are very rich in symbolism. And as I said, Lisa has evolved her own unique set of symbols to convey the messages of this tarot deck. I would say these cards, although there are bits of quite fine detail, generally speaking, they're probably simpler to look at. But I quite like the fact that you have to work a little bit harder to pick out all of the rich details that Lisa has included in these cards. Final thoughts then. I am fascinated by this deck, and as I said at the beginning of this video, it is a unique deck, and it certainly offers something very different to all of the other decks that I have in my collection. I just love the rich visual feast that Lisa has provided on each of the cards, and I think I'm going to learn a lot from it. Not only will it help me with my tarot journey and reading tarot cards, but I think the information that she has given in her book about the symbolism for each of the plants, the animals, the energy, is going to help me to continue to connect with nature a little bit more. And I do have a lot of decks which are nature based, but this one feels very rooted in that experience. And so, as I think I said earlier, I'm really excited to go on that journey. What I particularly like as well is the level of detail in the description that she's included, and to make things, because there's so much going on, she has put each of the symbols that she's included in bold. So if there was a particular symbol that you were drawn to, rather than reading the whole thing, you can just read the bit about the bit that resonates you. And actually, I didn't mention this, but in the beginning of her book, in her introduction, she says that she's created it with passion and creativity and intuition, and her intention for this deck is for you to use it intuitively, which is something I mentioned earlier. It is very good for just looking at the images and journaling, or whatever it is, your thoughts, initial thoughts about the cards. I do wonder whether, if you're new to tarot and you're keen to learn the typical meanings of tarot cards, whether you might find this challenging. However, if you're somebody that just wants an experience and someone who wants to connect to nature on a deeper level and to connect your own intuition, I can't see why you couldn't use this deck, because it offers so much more than some of the other decks that are out there. I think Lisa has really produced something very, very unique. and I absolutely love it, and I'm pleased that I pre-ordered it and I got my copy. So I am even more of a fan of Lisa McLoughlin art now, and I do have one of her other decks, which is the Tree Wisdom cards, which I do have another review, which I will pop the link up here. And something I didn't mention was that I'm using the two decks together because I think they work quite nicely. So you have the more chaotic and nuanced energies of the Gallimaufry Tarot with, I quite like having a summary from one of the tree cards, just sort of overarching enemy, so overarching energy of the whole reading, and it's something I quite like to do from time to time, not always. If you like the look at these decks, I would head over to Lisa's Etsy shop sooner rather than later, because not only is this Tarot Gallimaufry a limited edition deck, Lisa has announced this week on her Instagram that she's stepping back from producing indie tarot decks, which I think a lot of people are really sad about this, but I think she's been doing it for a few years now, and I think there is a lot of work involved in creating a tarot deck, particularly if you're by yourself and you're doing all of the work and you don't have that backup from a publisher. So I can totally understand why she would want to take time out, but I think it's such a shame because she has such a beautiful style and has really created these very important decks which all pretty much look at nature but from slightly different viewpoints. So yeah, go and support her. Follow her on Instagram if you don't do so already. I think she's got plans to continue with art based on nature, but it just won't be from a tarot perspective. Thank you so much for joining me today for my review for the Tarot Gallimaufry by Lisa McLoughlin art in indie deck. Let me know what you think about this deck. Do you have it, or is it something that you're interested in getting because it offers a different perspective to your other decks that you have, which is what I found? I would love to know. If you enjoyed this video today, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel for future tarot related content. And I'm hoping that I will be doing an update on my own tarot deck very soon. But until then, bye bye.